Hello, hello. Session number 5.
Awesome.
Kevin, just because it was your birthday doesn't mean you could ditch yesterday, man.
Won't happen again.
Happy 19.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's
Thank
awesome. I told Marco I don't know, Marco, did you, I don't know, we had something surprise for you, but maybe it didn't happen.
He's still gonna, it'll wait. Yeah.
All right, okay, never mind. What's up, Pablo?
Although you're muted, I think, or you're.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I've been talking, but okay.
All right, well, let's get started. I think tomorrow, Thursday, we might have a little bit shorter session because I have a conflict. So we said it will be an hour, 30 minutes to an hour. I don't know, Marco, you and I can talk tomorrow, but I've got about 30 minutes and then I have to break tomorrow a little bit early. You can keep the conversation going or we can just do it 30 minutes. So we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Okay. That works.
So here's what we're going to do today. I thought it would be important to share with you all. Let me show my screen here. I thought it would be important to share with everyone, for the coaches, myself and the rest of the team, to share with everyone what's the structure going to look like for the next, basically for the rest of the year. You know, I think we should talk about it as a group. I think input from anyone that's listening in, that's part of the benefit to being live on this program, is you can give us feedback and suggestions. But let's talk about, like, what are we going to be doing, you know, if we're going to be on calls or on Zoom every day for an hour, when these weeks turn into months, like, what do we want to do over the next several months through the rest of the year? Like, what's the rhyme and reason to evolve this so it benefits everybody? You know, we don't want it to be too structured like a class. We don't want it to feel like a curriculum, but at the same time, it can't be completely ad hoc and completely unstructured. There's got to be some rhyme and reason to what we're doing and how we're doing it. So I think finding a happy balance of the two is good to do. And what we'll talk through today is what that looks like. And this should be a group discussion because I want to evolve this. I mean, I have a perspective that I think is a good way to approach this, but I'm going to put it up there as a straw model. I don't know if you guys have heard the term straw model, but straw model means, like, I'm going to put it up as a draft. You hear people in business talk about this a lot. I'm going to put it up as a straw model. That means I'm going to put it up as a vision of a draft, but it's meant for us to ameliorate, to edit, to change, to improve. Okay. And so we'll do that on this call, and we'll take the whole session basically to do that. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
We're not going to go around and do introductions. We did that on the first few sessions, but this is the core team, the Expo D squad. So these are your coaches. Marco and I are the host. And with that, you know, this is what we covered to date. So this is the fifth session we're having. And sessions 1 through 4, we answered all these questions. They're all out on the website now. So if you're joining us for the first time, either watching this video for the first time or you're live right now with us, you're getting things a little bit out of context because there is some orientation that we covered, and that's basically the first 4 sessions. So, you know, it's important too, because if you're not oriented on what this is all about with these basic questions answered, you really don't know what we're doing here. And we want everyone to kind of have like-minded people, which means if you join this program and you participate, at a minimum, check out the first 4 discussions if you haven't already. You don't have to, after this point, you don't have to follow every discussion. You can jump in and out at times. If you can't make every discussion, you can't watch every video, that's fine. We don't want to make it so if you miss something, you're completely lost. But these first 4 sessions are rather important. So take a look if you haven't already. They're all on the website. And today, it's, you know, what are we doing the rest of the year? You know, like, how do we do this in bite-sized chunks to where it makes sense? And let's talk about our strategy for how we're going to all go through this journey. I want to make sure. Hey, Marco, on my screen, on your guys' screen, do you see like lines from where the video boxes are? Because I want to try to remove that.
We do see them, yes.
Are they gone now?
Yeah.
Okay, that's weird. That's kind of a defect in Zoom where it shows those lines. All right, you guys ready? This is the fun part, man. We're creating this together. We're creating our own model for how we get through this together. I'm going to put this straw model out there, okay? So my thoughts are, we've got the year. Hold on, I'm going to move this because I think it's the rest of the year. We'll go on past the rest of the year if people are getting value from this, but I don't know, let's set our sights for what we expect and what we want to achieve in the next 7-8 months through the rest of this year. Okay. The first 4 months, basically May, so in a couple weeks here, even though we're getting started, we're continuing tomorrow, of course, but in a couple weeks here, we'll really ramp up and we're going to do what I'd call establish a foundation. So this is giving you awareness and exposure to the art of the possible. And there's 2 parts of that. We'll go through that in a second, but you need this foundation. So I don't think it makes sense to be like, let's start talking about business and how you set up a business and how you create a business and what's an idea for a business. I don't think that should be the central point right away. I think if your aperture is like this and you can only see this far, if we start asking questions like, what type of business do you want to be in? What type of product or service can you offer? Is it social impact related? Is it commercial related? Like all those questions, I think you got to wait and see when your aperture is like this. It's like, oh, wow, there's a whole world out there. Now I can answer these questions. So, and this is also the fun part. This is meant to engage you and get you interested because this is pretty cool stuff. This is where we talk about 3D printed houses and flying cars and artificial intelligence and crowdsourcing and crowdfunding and all this kind of neat, shiny object stuff that is really interesting, just so you understand what's out there, right? And then I think after a few months of that, then we're going to get ramping up into how you become your own exponential entrepreneur. Keep in mind, all of this is to establish you as someone that can go in business for yourself, or when you work for someone else, you'll just be your own intrapreneur. Like in a company, you'll be an entrepreneur. It's called an intrapreneur, which regardless of whether you go in business for yourself or work for someone or manage other people within a company, it's always good to have these skills and to have this lens. So May and June, we are going to mainly focus on exponential technologies. And we've talked about this in the previous session. So see the weeks there, week 1 through 10. So the next 10 weeks, every week, we're going to hit a topic. The first week we'll talk about artificial intelligence, next advanced robotics, and we'll talk about the convergence of these technologies. We'll talk about a little bit of the history of some of them because it's interesting. We'll talk about some of the ethics because there are ethical dilemmas with some of these really disruptive technologies. We'll talk about what startups have done to use some of these technologies. So we'll get into business discussions, but it's just giving you more in-depth knowledge of what's the tools in your toolbox. Okay. Then we'll switch gears and we'll talk about examples of business models and tools. So we'll take you through how do entrepreneurs actually create businesses using new models like crowdfunding and crowdsourcing and software as a service. That's a big one. It used to be if I wanted to start a company 15, 20 years ago, I needed to get computer systems. I needed to buy software to run my business. I needed to hire people. Now all of that is outsourced or sourced as a service through some provider. So you don't have to buy the software. You can just use the software that's out there that Google or Amazon or someone lets you use to run your business. A lot of it, by the way, is free. And we'll explain why. But that's the opportunity here is, no joke, what would have cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even millions of dollars 10 years ago to run a business is available and being provided for free software, or very, very inexpensive. When I say inexpensive, I mean hundreds of dollars to leverage it. particularly at the size that we're talking about. And it's better than the software I used 10 years ago. I mean, it's just crazy. So that's the lens I want you guys to have. It's like the software to run your whole business is super cheap, if not free, and it's way, way better. And you can use it as a service, which means other people figure out how to run it for you. You just be the leader of the whole thing. You don't have to know how to run the software, build the software, or implement the software, okay? We'll get more into that. But that's what we're gonna talk about in July and August as a primary focus, okay?
Mhm.
We'll look at a lot of case studies when we do this. You know, look at some startups in terms of what they use and how they did it. You know, we'll break down like, what did Uber do or Airbnb? You know, some of the businesses that Google's getting into, you know, some entrepreneurs, what exactly is the model they did here? You got to dissect it and understand it. And it's not that complicated. Once you kind of dissect it and understand it, you'll get it. You know, the basics of business is supply and demand. Hopefully conscious capitalism, meaning you're thinking about sustainability and other things as you build a business, whether you're for profit or nonprofit. So we'll discuss all of these. Any questions before I go to the next half of the you know, the rest of this year? Any questions or comments about any of these topics? Does anyone want to have a little bit top line understanding of any of these, because it just sounds confusing, or if you're having trouble differentiating between exponential technologies and business models and tools?
Today, one of my friends, Jonathan, is on the line, and Jonathan also went to the first Exponential Entrepreneurship program.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and so Jonathan, do you wanna? Does this look familiar to kind of how we structured the Exponential Entrepreneurship program in Nava? See if he's there. You're muted, by the way. Don't know if he's online, but yeah, but maybe he'll share a little bit later.
Okay. Yeah, you know, this is also, you know, we're going to spend a good 20 minutes where you guys all give feedback on this too, okay? I want to get some questions throughout, but I do want to spend some time when we go through the whole layout here. Let's talk a little bit about, you know, this whole straw model, okay? The second part of this year, for the rest of this year, so basically September and October, now we're going to get into how do you start a business, whether it's a for-profit or social impact business, a non-for-profit, or both. You know, in the state of California, you can open up a benefits corporation, which means you're a social impact company, but you're for-profit, but you're focused on social impact. And by the way, setting up a new company is not a challenging thing to do either. You can do that online as far as establishing a company. And you don't have to, we'll talk about this, but you don't have to do that right off the bat either. You can operate as an independent contractor or an independent entity. But you know, how do you start a business? What's your product or service? How do you come up with a product or service? How do you know if it's a good market fit? How do you develop your strategy, or what we'll talk about, massive transformative purpose, MTP? A good friend of mine, Salim Ismail, coined that phrase, and he'll probably be a guest on this program. But it's like, have your passion. Don't just do something because it's just going to make you money. Maybe that is your passion, but you know, have some passion, because you're going to be successful if you're passionate about it. So what's your massive transformative purpose that you're trying to do? What's your strategy for this idea? How do you monetize it? And is it a good idea that you can monetize, commercialize, or make social impact strategy? Monetization means, can you turn it into revenue for yourself so you have income? Even if you're nonprofit, you need revenue, right? Whether you sell a product or service, or other organizations give you grants or funding to run your nonprofit, you still need to monetize it, so to speak, right? You need to get funding. How do you test and learn to evaluate if an idea has potential? So rather than just coming up with an idea and myself or Marco or Kevin or others saying, hey, that sounds like a good idea, you know, don't take our word for it. You got to go litmus test it. You got to test it and fail a little bit and learn. And there's ways to test things pretty cheap. And then how do you tell your story? because you're starting to ramp up, right? So during these weeks, it won't be week by week we'll hit these. We'll kind of hit them all together, but just to keep the consistency here, it's, you know, how do you do ideation? What's moonshot thinking? This is something that Astro Teller at Google, who runs Google X, which is called X. Astro Teller is someone who I've brought in many times to come speak to executives, and he's got a moonshot factory. If you Google Astro Teller, you'll see that he's a really prominent figure at Google that runs all their kind of out-of-the-box thinking ideas. The Google Loon project, the self-driving car, all those things come from Astro Teller's team. And he's got a great talk online about moonshot thinking. And there's a whole philosophy behind moonshot thinking. It's like, how do you go big? How do you go 10x, not 10%? Ethnographic research. This is, how do you study? It's almost like an anthropologist does when they study a civilization or people. It's how can you study society to understand what society might need and value and how people live their lives? You know, so I want you to be excited about this because you might have a degree in sociology or anthropology or something, and I hope you realize you're very relevant to anyone that's creating a for-profit or nonprofit business. You don't have to go to be a business. You don't have to be, my daughter is a biologist. She studied biology in college, and she's now an entrepreneur running a business. So I don't want you to think that you had to have some prerequisite. And I also don't want you to think that business means that you can't practice what you're passionate about. Good example is ethnographic research. You know, it's really based on some of the social sciences of understanding psychology of people, people's personas, how people think, how they live, how they interact. You got to understand that if you're going to offer something that serves value to society in a product or service. You're saying something, Marco?
I was just thinking that ethnographic research, I know it sounds, the word might sound a little tricky. It took me a second to kind of understand what it means, but a lot of it is just basically like going out in the field and collecting kind of visual data, I would say. And what's really cool about this is that I have some experience, even Pablo, in the community where to do like ethnographic research, sometimes like local nonprofits or government agencies, they really appreciate it because it's like you know, you get a team and then you go out in the field and you provide, you know, you get all this information that really helps, that could really help, like, you know, big organizations make decisions. And so there's like a lot of opportunity there. And I know like through the neighborhood council in South Central, like they're willing to fund up to like $10,000 just to like go out in the field and you know, do something. And there's like a whole grant writing process, but that's what I think about when I see ethnographic research.
Yeah, and that's awesome, Marco. I mean, you know, this program is focused on you guys in your communities, and we're talking about underserved communities by design. We're trying to get this out to communities that maybe aren't getting this exposure. I will tell you that you bring up a great point, Marco. For you to understand how you might be able to advise or consult businesses in your community, you got to go around and observe. Like, what are people doing? How are they working? How are they living? How are they interacting? My product, what product or service do they need? And then when you have an idea, you can actually go see some reaction to that idea. I mean, I think chances are when Bird launched their scooters all around LA, at some point, I guarantee you, when they were drawing this up on a whiteboard, thinking about this idea, they had to do some ethnographic research. They probably went out into the cities and into the neighborhoods and try to identify, is there a need here? Do we see people like walking on short distances? And, you know, if we go talk to them and interview them, not tell them what we're doing, just talk and interview them about, you know, you just got off the bus, where are you going? Well, I'm going to my job. It's 5 blocks that way. You're running late. You're kind of running. Yeah, I wish I had, you know, can't afford a taxi or don't want to get an Uber. I just need to get 5 blocks. See, that's ethnographic research. They probably thought, hey, there's a need here. There's a need for very short distance, low cost. And then the question is, will people, if we put scooters all over the place, will people vandalize them? Will they take them? Will they dump them? Will they take care of them? Will they maintain them? So they had to do some research on that to see, like, how would people react to that? And you can, do small pilots and test and learn and all this stuff. But that's what we're talking about, because you don't want to go all in with your chips and put all this money and effort towards something that you don't test a little bit. And part of that testing is ethnographic research. It's like seeing what type of reaction. It's also consumer research, persona mapping. We're going to go through all of this. It'll be very helpful.
And if you're shy, you know, for specifically on ethnographic research, sometimes you don't even have to you don't have to speak with people. You just observe.
Yes.
And like take notes. Funny thing is, I took a design thinking class and we did like a section on ethnographic research during my fall this year, and so or last year and so like one of the assignments was to just like literally sit down somewhere for like 2 hours and just like write down whatever you see. And so it was a little like, it seemed a little like odd to do that assignment, but like, you know, you get a lot of like raw insight that like when you go in without an agenda can really like produce a number of ideas unexpectedly.
That's awesome. And again, right, Marco, I mean, if you study anthropology or sociology, if that's your interest, like you never thought you'd be relevant in business perhaps, well, yes, of course. It's actually extremely important. Behavioral sciences are extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you could definitely follow that pursuit and that passion if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Did somebody have during the part of the program? Okay, that's Justin. We'll also cover how to remotely operate the business in case we're not in California. Yeah, as a matter of fact, so that's a great question. So there was someone that posted a question. During the part of the program, will we also cover how to remotely operate the business in case we're not in California? I'd say that all of these businesses will be remotely operated. That's the whole, so absolutely yes. As a matter of fact, an exponential entrepreneur is being able to operate this thing globally.
Mm-hmm.
You could live anywhere in the world, you could be in the world, and you can still operate this. Even if it's a physical business that has physical products that requires a physical service in a location, right? You can still, that's what we mean by an exponential entrepreneur. You never could do that before, now you could do that. I mean, think about it. We could all have a business together and we could be managing it, and I could be sitting in Timbuktu right now, right? Doesn't matter. You think I'm here in Cal, it doesn't, I mean, we can do this. And this is today, you know, in a year from now, we'll have augmented reality and we'll see each other in front of us. So, you know, yeah, absolutely. And that's the whole game plan here is, you know, screw the coronavirus. If it comes back again, we'll be ready.
Yeah. And I will say, I've also been like managing like my businesses and projects like remotely for like the last few months. I'm only back in LA because unfortunately coronavirus, but you know, like it's real and it's really cool that you could do that today.
And it kind of just started. I mean, the reality is that you couldn't really do this even a few years ago, guys. I mean, just the cost to do this, to be on a video conference was expensive several years ago. I mean, so that's what I'm saying. Like things are changing quickly. So you got to jump on this. Okay. So the last area is how do you fund, launch, and scale a business? You know, where and how do you start a business? Like, what does that even mean? So product and services first. Like we're going to do some ideation. We're going to go through, you know, come up. You know, depending on the size of the group, we can all coach each other. Marco, I think you want to coach folks outside of this 1 hour program so you can have your own sessions. I don't know if you knew this, but Zoom lets us break out into rooms even. I could have put us all into separate rooms if I wanted to. So we'll use the tools here to actually, you know, create a, you know, share ideas with each other, vet ideas with each other, come up with some concepts. And it's like a funnel. You start with a lot of ideas and you narrow it down. And I've learned a great deal from some people I really respect who do innovation as a science, which is, people don't think about innovation as a science, but it actually is. And I've got some former colleagues from a consulting firm called Doblin and Monitor, which does, it's called 10 Types of Innovation. I've got the book around here somewhere, but anyways, oh, there it is. This is brilliant. 10 Types of Innovation by Larry Keeley. He teaches at the University of Chicago. It just basically says, don't think every idea about innovation is about a product. So when you're trying to think of a business idea, don't think it all has to be product. You can innovate around services, around processes, around business models, around profit models, around your brand. There's a lot of ways to innovate and come up with ideas. It doesn't always have to be a product. Okay. And we'll talk about that. Really, really good stuff, 10 types of innovation. And, you know, so how do you start a business? How do you develop your strategy? How do you share that strategy and that vision with investors, benefactors, partners? That's the whole narrative that we talked about, the elevator pitch, but also how do you share that whole story? How to leverage your coaches, you know, Marco and team, how do you leverage mentors and the network that we're trying to build right now? So because this is later in the year when we're gonna get really into this, hopefully you've created some network of your own through this model. Maybe some of the mentors that I have on or that Marco has on end up being relationships that you guys carry forward and help you. But that's gonna be the good timing because you're gonna need it. You're gonna need support around you. How to not be afraid to fail and how to fail fast, cheap, and forward. So, you know, failure is okay. It's just, as long as it's fast, meaning you don't drag it out, you know it's not gonna work, so you stop. Therefore, you do it cheap. You don't spend a lot of money on it because you know it's not gonna work anymore. And it's forward, meaning you didn't make a mistake you made last time. So you're always making new mistakes. You're not making the same old mistakes. And that's actually part of the process of learning and becoming better and innovating better and becoming an entrepreneur. It's not bad to go through that cycle. It's actually a good thing. You know, we also, there's a word up there, develop an MVP. Anyone know what an MVP is? Have you heard that term, Marco?
The marginal value proposition.
No, MVP is minimum viable product.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
And the concept here is that you don't have to build the whole product. You can develop a minimum viable product because you want to test some things with that minimum viable product. If you decide to make it perfect and take 10 months to make it perfect, the market might have already gotten away and someone beat you to the punch. So it's good to come out with a minimum viable product, a product that is minimum viable. It's going to do well, but you didn't have to sink all that time and effort into it before you could actually get out and start testing it. Because a lot of the way you're going to ameliorate the product, a lot of the way you're going to ameliorate, which means to improve on, a lot of the way you're going to improve on the product or service is you're going to put out a minimum viable product or service in a controlled environment, kind of like a pilot, a test, and you're going to get reactions to it. And through that, you're going to evolve it. You're going to take the input and evolve it. So that's called a minimum viable product. The reason why that's important is, think about this. Let's say we all came up with the best idea and we got all excited. We're like, oh my God, that's like a great idea. Nobody's thought of it. Okay, let's spend the next 8 months just making everything perfect, completely fastidious, like meticulous, great, right? Well, we finally launch it and it's beautiful, it's amazing. But what happened was 5 months earlier, someone launched a minimum viable product and they got all the name recognition, they got all the press, they got all the followers, and now we look like copycats, you know? And so you really want to think about a strategy of minimum viable product. There might be circumstances where you modify that strategy, but for the most part, that's just a going in theory, right?
I'll give you like one example to kind of make sense of this. If you think about a bike, right? So like everyone kind of like what are the basics of a bike? There's like the wheels, the frame, right? The seat. That's about it, right? And so like instead of like focusing on like the design, the color, the bells and whistles, we just focus on what is like needed to like, you know, to do what a bike does. And that's really what a viable product, a minimal viable product is.
Yeah, perfect example. So we're going to help you guys with all this stuff, but that is, you know, what the year I think will look like. Now, the way we're going to do this, the format is for every one of these discovery sessions, this 30 minutes to an hour, we're going to use interviews. We're going to have show and tell, but we're going to do it exponential style. Okay. Fireside chats. I don't know if you guys have heard that term before, but that's a term also often used at business conferences and at seminars where you go and there's a fireside chat. That's basically saying it's just a simple, you know, 2 or 3 people sitting down having a discussion, a fireside chat. And it's not meant to be very formal or rehearsed or presentation style. And so we'll use a lot of fireside chats because it's just easier to listen to. And you guys can participate in those fireside chats. You can ask questions if we've got a guest on. You can ask questions of the coaches, of myself, etc. Panel discussions means that we got 4 or 5 people that maybe we pull 4 or 5 entrepreneurs, like a good panel would be the coaches, Marco, Kevin, Noella, Pablo, Christian, you know, they could be a panel. And then you guys have a whole hour where you just ask them any question you want, right? Q&A sessions, whiteboard sessions, you know, Zoom allows us to break that into a whiteboard room. I don't know if you guys have used that feature yet, but we can whiteboard stuff live here on a canvas basically. And then another thing I think we'll do is, because we can share screens, I'd like some of you to start finding articles that you think are really interesting. Maybe you don't completely understand it. And then you share your screen and you just pull that article up online, you know, from whatever website. And then we talk about it as a group. You know, for example, the 60 Minutes, CBS 60 Minutes episode I showed you guys yesterday, we're at USC, University of Southern California. They've got that artificial intelligence kind of hologram type model that lets you basically talk to someone years after they passed away, and they answer any question, basically any question you throw at them for the most part, where they share with you, you know, things in their experience they basically teach you. So, I mean, we might get online and just browse through that online and just talk about it. And I think it's really important that you guys start being able to comprehend stuff that you're reading, because right now the literature, the stuff that's out there, even the videos you watch might be a little confusing because it's got too much vocabulary that you don't understand. You don't understand certain terms. You don't understand certain things. I want it to be where you guys can start. I want to teach you how to learn, right? Where you can learn on your own and be self-sufficient. So some of the sessions will do that. And then as far as who's doing that, you know, you've got Marco and me, you've got the coaches and all of their network, right? And you've got the, you know, the ecosystem that I have that I'm going to bring in as mentors. So that's what you should expect. Every session around those topics, we'll use these formats and these ways of sharing and learning and having a discussion. Okay, and hopefully this will be a more interesting style than just a lecture or just PowerPoint slides, or, you know, and if you miss one session, you can pop in the next session. You're not gonna, you know, you can go back and watch the recording because you'll know what topic we're gonna talk about, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanna mention is this is not sequential, meaning, sure, we're going to start off with exponential technologies in May and June, but that's going to be the predominant focus. But we'll have discussions about how do you start a business and how do you get funding. We'll talk about business models and tools. So we're going to be talking about everything throughout the whole thing, but as illustrated here, it's just going to have, things will have more focus at times, sometimes versus the other. I'm going to do this again just because it took me a long time to do this animation, and I'm going to get two cycles out of it. Actually, that took like 10 seconds to build that animation. I'll have to show you how to do that. Anyways, but the point is, you guys get the point here. It's like, we're going to be talking about all this stuff, but we have to keep some focus. And so our focus is going to be, sorry, you know, this is going to be our kind of roadmap for what we're going to do over the next many months.
Yeah, and I also want to add that what's great about this, even like, you know, obviously we're focusing on like entrepreneurship, business tech, right? But I really do think that it's you know, we're all gonna walk away with a better sense of how to be intellectually curious, right? And so like the strategies that were discussed, you know, they shouldn't feel as like, you know, as if it's like homework or like, you know, like a lecture. It's really about just having like a conversation and learning from each other, because like if you think about it, like, you know, there's so much information that we encounter on a daily basis, right? Like, you know, you pull out your phone, there's social media, there's on the internet, there's like everything basically. And so now the danger with having so much information is that like we as humans and as individuals basically, like, we have to get good at filtering what information is important. And so I hope that by the end of at least you know, of a few sessions, that we'll start getting comfortable understanding what information is important and actually creating more value from that information.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's perfect, Marco. You know, Marco, you could tell, Marco, you've got some really valuable insight because you're very self-aware, and it's important that people get self-aware. Self-awareness means you kind of understand what you're dealing with, you know, and that's really important that you get oriented to where you understand kind of what you're dealing with here in terms of what you need to, eventually the light bulb will go off and you'll be like, I know exactly what I need to learn right now. And then it gets exciting because when you have that light bulb where it's like, man, I know exactly what I need to learn right now, you basically see how you're going to control your destiny. And then it's just knowledge. It's if I can get that knowledge, I'm golden.
Yeah.
I remember when I was out of college, I had children very young. So I had a daughter just out of college, was married and stuff. And I remember like I was working at the Kellogg company at the time. And back in those days, I actually knew how to computer program, which not a lot of people did. But I was at the Kellogg company, I was in the business sales and marketing side, right? But I remember like the light bulb clicking because I realized once I got exposed to how businesses work, I also started to observe, it's kind of like that ethnographic research. I started to observe like what's happening here. And I noticed there's all these inefficiencies at the company. And I'm not being critical of Kellogg's. It was like every company was like this.
Wow.
Everyone uses paperwork to do stuff. And there's computers out there now. And there's the internet now. Nobody's using automation. And I remember everybody's job was mostly a lot of administration we had to do. So the light bulb clicked because I thought, wait a second, I know how to build software that will automate things that I see everybody doing. And I'm self-aware enough to know that software can automate that. That means I knew the art of the possible. I knew you could automate it. I didn't have the programming skills yet to do it though. I had to go read books to learn how to do it. But that's when it all came together because I thought to myself, huge problem, ethnographic research, huge problem, really like lame process, you know, like really administrative, doesn't make any sense. This is a business trying to be profitable and they're really not looking at the new tools and new technology that's out there that they could be using. This is right when computers started to be, personal computing started to be much more adamant. And then I realized I just have to learn this. Once I learned it, and did I have a background in computer programming before that? No, I didn't learn that in school. But I realized I can control my destiny. Like I'm going to provide for my family because I see exactly what I can do. All the pieces are coming together. And not a lot of people can see that right now, but I can see that because I'm peeking around the corner. And that just got my motivation and my confidence way up. And sure enough, you know, within a year, they were moving me into the corporate headquarters at the Kellogg company to help basically take my ideas and put them throughout the whole company, like automate the whole, you know, many parts of the company. And I was young then. So I was like, and it was just, if I think back, I wasn't smarter than anybody else. I wasn't more educated. It's not like I got all A's in school or something. It's just that I kind of observed and I looked and I realized, and then I also knew because I did have exposure to computers and computer programming, just like I'm trying to get you guys exposed to exponential technologies. That's the modern day version of that. I kind of knew stuff could be done. I knew the art of the possible, where at that time people didn't really know that computers could be doing this so cheaply and so effectively. So, you know, that's where I want to get you guys is you hopefully will, eventually the light bulb will click. And then it gets pretty cool because then you get thirsty for the knowledge and you have a lot of options. You can, even if you can't get into college or you don't have money to go to college, you still have a lot of options because the knowledge is not hard to obtain. It's out there and it's for free if you want it. Is that fair, Marco?
Yeah, I mean, like the Los Angeles Public Library, right? Like it gives us access to like lynda.com, to like a whole bunch of books, and academic journals, like, and that's like a free resource that's provided by the city, but like it's one that isn't, I would say, leveraged on average by most.
That's a good point. I mean, Marco, would you say in the community there, do you think what percentage of people have a challenge even getting access to the internet? Is that more prevalent? Is that as prevalent as it used to be, or do you feel like that's becoming more and more of I mean, it's basically like a basic human right to have access to the internet. And
I know access to the internet is still an issue in some households, right? especially ones with like undocumented families where like the parents don't rely on internet for work and for income. And so that there is that issue. But what's great is that like there's like coffee shops, right? There's school, and there's definitely like there's community spaces that open up to students who want. And I think what's with that, like I know of some spaces in the community that again they're not like they're just like students are unaware of like going to like a location where like there's access to the internet and how it can really transform the productivity they have.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I will say, yeah, so access to the internet, it's definitely still an issue. I mean, Pablo, Christian, anything on that?
Or devices to get you on the internet, like a smartphone or computer as well. I have to imagine with coronavirus, it's going to make this, we talked about this yesterday, right? It's going to accelerate the adoption, but also the shift where society realizes, the government realizes everyone needs to have access to the internet and some devices to get on the internet.
Yeah.
Because how can you make it through this hard time right now when you're isolated at home? I mean, if anything, this is going to push that to make it more prevalent. How about Kevin or the others? Do you guys have any input on that or insights?
Yeah, I know at least the schools around this community, they gave the students a Chromebook and I believe like a personal hotspot device, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean if they wanted it, it was offered to them if they didn't have access to it somewhere else. So I mean, other than that, if the students don't go to school, then I feel that's a different issue. But if you're in to school and you're searching for the resources, you'll be able to find them. I think it's definitely there. You just have to kind of want it and kind of just search for it. But you'll get it if you really need it.
Yeah. But I think that's unfortunate too, like the fact that students like have to go looking for the resource, and the fact that it's not available sometimes like at home,
Yeah.
a laptop, internet. I know like I've worked with a couple of students and like, it really does suck that like, to like sometimes have no other option but just like share a laptop. Imagine just like, like if you have two other siblings, that's three people who are going to school, and then you have to share a laptop or a desktop, something like that. There's definitely a complication.
Well, here's what we should do is, I do think it's feasible. I'm not going to promise this, but I think it's something we can explore. I do think by November, December, when we're really talking about building your business, right? I think if our community here, if there's people that don't have laptop or internet access, particularly if they can't afford it, we can at least try to go out and get funding for that from donors and sponsors. Because I do think if we got a committed group and everyone's, we really demonstrate that we're serious and people are really trying. I mean, there's a lot of groups around that will give money to a nonprofit like ours for that purpose, and we'll use it for only that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I will even contribute financially if we get to that point. If I see you guys have some real good ideas and the only thing holding you back is you don't have a computer and internet access, I'll give it to you and you pay me back when you make money. So I don't want any barriers here. There's no excuse. There's just really isn't. There's no excuses nowadays. I said, when I was younger, I could come up with excuses. People don't want to give me a loan. They discriminate against me. They don't think I'm smart enough. They don't like my background. They're prejudiced, whatever it is. You'd be surprised that you can get a business up and running literally from your computer. Not that that's the way it should be. I'm not excusing any of those things. I'm just saying you can still get out there and not have those biases affect you like they used to. Because you buy stuff off the internet today, or you buy services and stuff, you don't know who's on the other end, nor should you care, really. I mean, unless they have a criminal record.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning unless they're trying to fraud you. So, I don't, and let me backpedal that statement. I don't want this to sound controversial. Even if you had a criminal record or you're an undocumented immigrant, it doesn't prevent you from being an exponential entrepreneur to have a legitimate business.
Mm-hmm.
If someone wanted to be prejudiced against you or biased against you because you have a criminal record, yeah, your normal society in the traditional way, you're going to get screwed kind of. They're not going to hire you because they're going to pick someone else that hasn't. But that's why we're sharing this with the community at large, no matter what your background, where you come from, even if that scenario is is part of your history, it doesn't mean that you can't be an exponential entrepreneur, because getting software as a service, it's not going to ask you if you have that in your background. You know, getting somebody to put a business up on the internet, it doesn't ask you if that's your background. It's just a different world, right? You're going to work for yourself. So I don't, I'm just saying in general, no matter what things you might be struggling with, or anyone that's participating that might fall into that camp, I want you to give this a go, because it's different.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it would be great, cross my fingers, in a few weeks, months, you know, everyone gets comfortable, and then we, you know, we start using the strategies that we'll learn together. You'll get to a point where, like, you know, you have the skill and you know, skills and experience that organizations and businesses and, you know, investors, people will actually want to support. And, you know, and then it's just about, like, you know, what is your list of, like, of needs and wants, and then from there it's like, you know, you can really do some powerful things.
Yeah. Perfect. You know, one of the things we talked about too is it was on that slide. I'm not going to share the screen again, but you notice it had how to set goals and objectives, how to craft a leadership style, how to become a leader, how to do public speaking or how to speak with others in groups, also how to deal with anxiety and stress when you run a business. So we'll talk about those topics too when we get to it, because those are really important. You brought this up, Marco. You don't have to, you can be an introvert and still have a business. As a matter of fact, that's the best business for an internet business, is if you're introverted, because you really don't have to, if you didn't want to, you didn't have to interact with anyone. You know, for the most part, you can do everything online. And by the way, exponential entrepreneur doesn't mean you're doing everything online. You're using online resources, but you could be doing a business like Marco. You're an entrepreneur, you're using online, but your business is to go out to businesses and help them with services, with marketing services.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what we'll do for the remaining 10 minutes. Let's get questions from people. I'll share the screen one more time, because just to put up the list, but we need some class participation. Sorry. What do you guys think? What are we missing? Anything that you'd like us to put a focus on? Does this look pretty good? Does it not make any sense? What are you guys thinking? Put some stuff in the chat. If you would, please.
Do we have any, I mean, maybe this is more like a follow-up, but I know that a lot of what we'll be doing is like teaching, right? And I you know, I think that what we learn would help to supplement that with like some actual activities or technical things, and so maybe that's more of a, like, you know, and I could totally volunteer to lead that, and it doesn't have to be during the 1 hour calls. It could be outside of these discussions, but I do think that some kind of technical component where, like, you know, even like walking into something like to some software, something like Canvas, right? Like, if you know, Canvas is like an online design software, you know, and it's like, you know, think of like Adobe Photoshop, you know, and, you know, two very different price tags, but like, you know, one is free and one isn't, and so you know, I think that, you know, there could be some value in you know, showing, you know, kind of some technical, you know, tools that can be used.
I think it's perfect, especially when we get to the latter part in November, December, October, when we talk about how do you start a business and get it up operational, get it up and running. You know, I think that would be a great time, because this is the goal. If we all get excited about the technologies that's out there, the art of the possible, and then you see some really cool models that are out there, like how Uber created their business, and you start to get it, And then we come up with some, that's the second part. And then the third part is you come up with some ideas. That's when I typically see the magic happen, because we haven't got to some of the more, specific stuff yet, like the software you're using in your business, how do you operate that software, all that, because I want you to warm up to the fact of A, I get what the big picture looks like. B, I just came up with a really cool idea and I kind of tested it. And I think this product or service would do really well in a social impact and or commercial sense. That's when if that happens and you reach that goal, you're going to be asking us the questions. How do I run this thing? What's the software I use? How do I do this? How do I do that? I mean, that's what's going to happen. Versus I think that the educational system today, to some extent, kind of starts with, let's show you how to use this software to do a presentation or to run a spreadsheet, to put a budget together, to look at graphs and charts and do analysis. I want to get to that, but I want to get to that when you want it, when you're thirsty for it, when you're excited for it, and that's, what do you think about that, guys? Is that the right approach? Noella, say something. I need to hear from you. Kevin. Now I'm just picking on people. What do you guys think?
I mean, I like it. I think it sounds good. I think it will definitely be it'll definitely benefit students. But something I realized, and I want to share, is that coming into this, I thought I was like, oh, I'm gonna be trying to teach the students, but I didn't realize I'm gonna be learning as well. Like every day when I leave, I'm like, wow, like I didn't know that. Wow, like that's something new. So I feel like it's cool. Like it's not just us teaching, but at least for me, it's like me learning a lot every day.
Me too.
So I'm excited to come back like every day and like learn something new.
Good. I'm happy if it's just the core team teaching each other. I'd like others to.
We're still learning. We're still learning.
Yeah.
Because the real value is going to be, you guys are going to be able to put it in perspective. And I think, you as coaches can help. You are going to be teaching. You're just going to be teaching other people how to learn, and eventually what's going to be really valuable is, how I showed that even when we're talking about the exponential technologies, we're still going to be talking about how to build a business. It's not that linear, it's not that sequential as I have on the screen right now. It's the one that overlaps more. So I would, at least once or twice a week, even in the beginning, starting next week, you guys will actually talk about some businesses that you ran. I don't think we'll get into the weeds yet on what software you're using, because people won't know what that means, nor may they care yet. But we'll just talk about, like, how did you come up with that idea? What roadblock did you fall into? So you guys will be mentoring and coaching as well, because that firsthand experience is going to be huge. But yeah, I'm hoping that you benefit. Remember, one of the objectives on that objective slide was to develop you guys as coaches.
Mm-hmm.
So, and other people that join us might want to be a coach. A question, Omar, you're awesome. If we were to start a business, how would we be able to deal with the competitive side of entrepreneurship? If we were to start a business, how would we be able to deal with the competitive side of entrepreneurship? That's a good question. I think, let me see if I understand the question. You're saying if I started a business to be an entrepreneur, and if I'm just starting as an entrepreneur and others have been an entrepreneur for a long time, won't they outcompete me? Won't they put something out there that's better than me or outcompete me? Is that, Omar, is that what you're saying, or is it something different? You can either type or take yourself off mute, either one you feel comfortable with. Okay, he said yes. So, that's a great question. Marco, do you want to, I'll share my insight on that, but before I do, because I'm trying to not talk as much, Marco or Kevin or anyone else, do you want to respond to that real quick, and then I'll give my 2 cents?
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch a little bit on it. I think there's a lot of competition, but what's cool about entrepreneurship is you look at what other people are doing and you do something completely different. You either start something new or you'll reinvent something. So then you're doing something that no one else is doing. So then you're like, you have no competition. Or when there is competition, you look at them, you're like, hey, that's pretty cool. How can I make this mine? How can I make this better?
Wait a second, Kevin. I just realized, didn't you start a business on your campus that was not a new idea? It was
yeah, exactly, yeah.
All right, so you're the expert. This is a perfect example. So, Omar, you're speaking to the expert, your coach here.
Yeah, so I started a business exactly like Lopsy or like Postmates, like Uber Eats, and they're big businesses. There's no way I can compete with them. But what's something I can do that they can't? and that's going to my campus because I attend a private university. So I created a delivery service for private universities, hiring those students from inside the university to hire from the restaurants from inside the university, right? They can't access our campus, so then that's not really, you don't really have competition because you're kind of just making something yourself. And actually, like I've been contacted by Uber Eats and stuff now because they saw the potential in this and they saw the value. Like, hey, like we can't get into these campuses, but students can because they're right inside. So kind of just make it your own thing, make it your own idea. Just improve it. And if there is competition, like just don't be afraid. When I was starting up, there was like 6 other students trying to like do the same thing. And when I started, they were already doing it. They were already like, they've been working on it for months. But I just saw that I was like, hey, they're not doing it how I would do it. Why don't I just like do it different? How I think it'll work out. And hey, it doesn't always work out, but if you put enough effort into it, I think it definitely will pay off.
And I'll share this real quickly. You guys still see me?
Yeah. Abundance.
Can't see myself, but hold on a second. You guys can see me on. You can see me on the video still.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a good friend of mine and someone who I have tremendous respect for, Peter Diamandis. He was the founder of X Prize, where I was CEO for a while. He was co-founder of Singularity University. He's a New York Times bestseller. Here's part of the answer to your question, Omar. Don't think in a mindset of scarcity, think in a mindset of abundance. Let me repeat that. Don't have a mindset of scarcity, have a mindset of abundance. What we mean by that is exactly what Kevin just went through there. Sure, there's tons of players that are doing Uber Eats and food delivery and all that stuff. The world is a big place. There's 7.5 billion people on it. There's plenty of an abundance of demand for a service. So just because someone else is doing it, competitor is doing it, doesn't mean that you can't do it too. We're in a world of abundance. Don't think from a mindset of scarcity. If you think from a mindset of a scarcity, you'll convince yourself not to do any of this stuff. The other thing I'll share with you real quick, and then Marco or others, please chime in. But the other thing I'd share with you on that notion of competition is you can take an idea or come up with an idea, and it might work very effectively in your world or your community. The good example is what Marco's done. Marco's doing marketing services business. That's one of his companies. There's a million companies that do that. But guess what? They're not doing it for South Central Los Angeles businesses. So Marco found a void, a gap in supply and demand. You want to pick that up, Marco? I mean, that's an example of, if you would have said, well, I can't do this, I don't know I can't create a marketing service company, there's too much competition out there, I'm just getting started, but you did it, right?
Yeah, and then I think also because I'm young, I'm relevant to students, and so I think a lot of like nonprofits that I work with, and businesses are like they realize that if they hire a more traditional company, that traditional company may have lost touch with folks who are like less than like 25. And so I think that's really the value that I saw that I wanted to deliver, because I'm at an age where like I understand the needs of students and the needs of young people, and so that's what I do. And I also wanted to add that in response to the competition, that like for me, like I take a very collaborative approach where like obviously there's competition, and it's you wanna kind of deliver the best like product, service, or whatever it may be. You want to do the best business. But I really do think that if you go in with like a positive mindset of like really building like community and trust among people, even if they're your competitors, that overall everyone would be better off through collaboration. And so I always like take that into consideration, because like I think for me it's like there are moments in life where you're faced with like a decision, and that decision may either like burn a bridge or create a new one. And so like for me, like I'd rather create a new bridge instead of like destroy it.
That's great. We probably have time for one more question and we'll call it a day. Anybody else? We're at the top. We start 5 minutes late, so we go 5 minutes over. We're just about there. All All right, was that helpful, everyone, to kind of understand what the structure is going to look like? Seeing people nod their heads, that's good. So with that, we'll end our session in our ceremonial way. Let me exit out of here. See you tomorrow. It's the same code to get in tomorrow for the Zoom meeting. We thank you on behalf of the core team here. Our slogan, we got your back. Now let's go exponentially disrupt this. And to end it, never gets old, does it? Never gets old.
Like a TV show.
All right, guys. See you tomorrow.
All right, everybody.
On his sweater already, mom's spaghetti, he's nervous. Still on the surface, he looks calm and ready to drop bombs. But he keeps on forgetting what he wrote down. The whole crowd goes so loud, he opens his mouth, but the words won't come out. He's choking how? Everybody's choking now. The clock's run out, time's up, over, wow. Snap back to reality.